to Inquiry into Self. Today, I get to have a conversation with my very good friend, Paul, who is also participating in running this channel, producing this channel, and has been on the spiritual path for a long time. And definitely somebody that I resonate with, somebody I can bounce off.
My business card for the channel is I'm the power behind the throne.
That's perfect.
All right, Queen. You're the queen bee.
I certainly buzz.
This is a very serious spiritual channel. Sorry about that. Okay, yes. It's my pleasure to help with the channel. I do the editing and not as much need for editing anymore because you do this channel with amazing perfection. Your ability to do one take is legendary. We should get you a job in the advertising market because you'd be a big hit. Maybe selling M&Ms or something like that.
Well, I do like M&Ms.
Anyway, here we are.
Yes. And just recently, we were having a conversation where you mentioned recognizing that life doesn't have to be transactional.
Right.
And how that starts to filter into so many different areas. So I want to hear a little bit more about how that's affecting your different aspects of your life.
Sure. Well, the thinking is always around how we are marketed to. I use the M&M to be funny, but actually, it's a good example of how our whole culture is around selling each other things, whether we sell ideas or we sell M&Ms or we sell vacation packages or spiritual packages, or you can meditate for $9.99 on this app. And so there's a certain, of course, utility to be able to buy your food from the store, these types of things. And by no means in setting aside some of the utility bits, but we've kind of gotten to the point now with the internet and with scale technology where every single thing is a transaction. So I don't have a phone that I talk to my friends. I have a $9.99 a month plan where I've subscribed to a thing that allows me access to socialness or whatever. So I think we were having a conversation about the impact of transactionality on spirituality in terms of can I get enough transactions lined up that I get to some end point in spirituality, when in fact spirituality is transactionless, which was the conversation we had.
Exactly. Not only is spirituality transactionless, but it just turns out that life can be transactionless. I mean, I guess there's little practical things, but like, am I in my relationship with Daniel because I'm trying to get to this ideal of a good marriage? Turns out I'm not. Every moment I'm with him, I'm discovering why I'm in a relationship with Daniel.
Right.
In fact, we had this reading done where his purpose in life is to say no. And I can say I have grown more times from him saying no to me than from anything else. So it turns out I'm in a relationship with Daniel to learn how to receive a no.
Well, it turns out he says no to all of us, which is part of it's his role.
That's right. Exactly. It's perfect.
He's the empowering force, which is why we love him so.
So it's a process of just discovering. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, I'm having an amazing time, and I didn't even know how this was going to happen.
Right. And so you guys like to hike.
Yes.
And you send pictures via text and Facebook, et cetera, of the magnificent hikes that you enjoy. And so that's a great example of how transactionality can seep into things that we do, because a hike is a ramble. There's nature, there's conversation. Sometimes you're tired, so you stop. Maybe you take a sip of water. All these things just emerge based on how you're feeling. Yet there's also what time should we get to the hike? Let's get this hike over with, because, let's get a map of the US and do all the trails we want to hike. And this is number 27. And so the utility of transactionality ends when suddenly now we're going to box up that hike as part of a project. And so the project is, there's taking hikes and setting them aside. It's this example of people who like to go to Major League Baseball stadiums, right? So there's the game of baseball where you might sit and watch and have a little popcorn and watch people play baseball. And then there's, I'm going to go to every Major League Baseball stadium in the United States. And at what point does it stop being about baseball and the enjoyment of it? And what does it become this kind of weird transaction where I'm going to complete this transaction, and once I get it done, I'm just relieved that I don't have to do anything more with baseball because I'm tired of going to different places. So the obviousness of that is that people might listen and say, well, yeah, of course it's all transactional and everything's on sale, et cetera. But I think the valuable part of the consideration is how much it seeps into everything, and how not just the funny example of the hikes or the baseball, but more how everything is cut into these little transactions in our lives. And I think that is as spiritual a journey as sitting and meditating is actually observing yourself being transactional and just catching yourself and saying, okay, I'm now aware that I'm spending time with family transactional. Like I got to be in bed by 8, so I got to go, or whatever your example might be.
Yes, another example. I remember I bought a ticket to some event, and partially through, I realized I really wasn't enjoying myself. I would be enjoying myself more sitting at home doing something else. But, was I going to leave and tell people I didn't see the whole thing? And yes, I left because I was more interested in just enjoying myself.
Right.
So I didn't have anything to tell, but I sure had a lot better time.
In that case, you leaned into the present experience of just, I don't want to be here. I want to be doing something different. Many people would say, well, I paid $47 for this ticket. I'm not going to leave and not get, quote, my money's worth. And that's a great example of how transactionalism will seep into everything we do. We used to go skiing, and our skiing was driven a lot by how much we paid for the passes for the season. So there's a certain break-even point where if you go the 4th time as you ski, then you're paying a little bit less. The entire thing's a silly mind-based exercise because you're counting the peas on the plate that you're moving back and forth. I mean, it's a false accounting because none of it makes any sense, right? So if you like to ski, that's wonderful. If you like to be knitting at home, that's wonderful. But like saying I have to ski 4 times so I get my money's worth there's no reality to that at all, to that transaction.
Exactly. Instead, there becomes this noticing of what's the inner movement of life.
Right.
And that, I think you've also just discovered that it's not a local thing that our identity can control. It's something much bigger.
Right. And it certainly isn't something that you can break into its constituent parts and apply a value to.
Right. Right. So how did that come to clarity for you, that you weren't like this little Paul making your life happen? How did you realize that?
Well, I came from an extreme tradition of making all those little incremental value judgments. And so I came from a very organized childhood. I came from a very structured background. I went from Catholic school to the military. I mean, everything was transactional in terms of it's 7 o'clock. I have to be here at 7:05. I have to be there. And I went into business, and business was like I have a 4:30 meeting and a 5:30 meeting and a 6:30 meeting, etc. So it was all in terms of transactionality. And so what emerged from that was an awareness that there's no end to the transactions. You can just transact endlessly. So using the baseball analogy, I don't know why I'm on a baseball kick today, but we're going with it. There's no end to the season because there's a championship this year, then there's a baseball season next year, and just goes on and on and on. And people are just like, no, if we just win the championship this year, we will have achieved the transaction we always wanted, right? But then, well, there's a new season. You're only as good as your last season. And I actually think sports contributed to my, in business, contributed to my moment of intellectual awakening, which is just more peas on a plate, of course, but just like there's no end to this transactionality. And so in business, really, you want 5% growth. If you get 8%, then you get a little award and a bonus. If you get 3%, then you did bad. And so I would watch year after year after this same kind of endless loop would go on. And I'd say, well, then there's really actually no end to the transactions. We're just living in this little, I got to make budget this year. I'm got to panic about that. And so I think that was a moment where I was first aware of, and this powered my move toward looking into other ways of being, which would be a less transactional way of being. If that makes sense.
Right. But it sounds like there was also a point where it wasn't just intellectual, like you just got that this thing, this aliveness is not, you're not the puppet, you're the hand in the puppet.
Yeah, right. Well, I had a moment where I just realized that the state of being zoned out, which is what I used to label this state of presence. If I was sitting as a human being just present, I would say, oh, I'm zoned out. I got to get back to work or whatever, right? Yeah, that started as a kid. What are you doing over there zoning out? It was, for some reason, I guess that's very much California of the 1970s. I was zoning out. And then I had this just moment where I realized zoning out is actually the answer. Not the zoning out label. It's that moment where you're present and there's just color and there's just sound and there's sensation. That's it. And then everything else is a transaction that we layer on top of it, which is just the thought.
Right.
So once I realized that, then the thoughts didn't end. Obviously, they still continue on. My fantastic baseball analogy is a thought, but the underlying presence became the foreground.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then you've also used a lot of inquiry, a lot of Byron Katie's work. How has that complemented this recognition?
Instrumental in helping illustrate how malleable thoughts are. So there's once you get past this understanding that everything you create is a thought, thoughts then feel scary and permanent. And so with the Byron Katie work, so I did the work for a year, every day for a year. And we had a friend on the other end. We were doing it by a Google document. So we'd write in the Google document a thought, and then we turn it around and do the Byron Katie practice, which is psychological reassessment, which is what we do here on this channel, which is self-inquiry. And I did it every day for a year. And so I went through this very fascinating curve that I can't explain to you in words, but the only way I can describe it is to begin to actually see how easy it is to overcome a thought. Where in the beginning, there's a thought that thoughts are these hard things. And, I have this, ever since I was a child, I believed that I was, an extrovert, an introvert, or whatever. And all those are just thoughts, right? And so then you realize it by doing the work that thoughts are completely ephemeral, like utterly defeatable. I mean, there's no thought that you can't immediately dispense with once you create the conditions to do it. And that's what the work does.
Exactly. I can so relate. There is no thought that it's true. And every time that I find myself in some kind of conflict with what's happening, the key point is, okay, can I figure out what is the thought that is creating this conflict here? Because so often they're just really things I would have taken for granted. I agreed to be somewhere at a certain time and the other person's not. And there's the thought, well, where are they? They should be here. Oh, wow. No, they shouldn't be, apparently. But often it's just something that we just take for granted. And it's certainly not true.
And we take for granted with the feeling of permanence around a thought. the person across the street shouldn't park their car in the spot that they park. And that's a real one. Like I have a neighbor who parks his car in a spot that is not authorized, right? And even though I'm enlightened, I still notice that, and it grinds my gears if I were to believe in thoughts, right? But that's there's a permanence to the feeling of the thought when it first occurs. Like, well, there's something real there, and then you reverse it, and you say, oh, well, actually, it's just me observing it, and a line painted on the ground is just somebody painted it with paint. It doesn't mean anything. In fact, it's not even his car. He's just a guy driving a metal thing. And you can get really silly with it. And that's what some of the more extreme versions of Byron Katie's work are these really wild examples that she will use, or some of her very knowledgeable helpers will use. But they're making the point that the entire thing is a construct. But it's not so you become, construct-less. It's that ultimately, I think that the secret of all of this is that the thoughts truly are defeatable easily. So here's an example. I had this thought that around sports, not baseball, because we've done that to death, Lisa, and I just hope we can just drop the baseball thing. But I had this thing about playing basketball as a kid. And when I was doing the work for a year, I was going through this very intense process of, day to day, what was happening. And then suddenly I started having these dreams of playing basketball. It was really wild. And so eventually what popped out, and it really did just kind of pop out, was this thought that I'm not a good basketball player. And I'm not. It's that, I'm not saying that there's any mistruth to it, but I realized how much stock I'd put in, like beating myself up about that fact. And then it went away. And like it went to, I didn't care about basketball anymore, but it was in there. And that was, I'm only 30 years old, of course, but it was probably in there for 45, 50 years. And then it just went away like that easy. And so we put all this weight on thoughts when actually they're all, even the old ones, even the childhood ones, are by and large ephemeral and can be easily dispensed with.
Yes. So-and-so is my mom. Well, that's a label. And my time, what is my time? There's no such thing as my time. What is my time?
Well, that's interesting you bring up the time. I think that's an excellent one, right? So time as a transactional tool becomes this very weird calculation that we do mentally. Then suddenly time has a value. Is this thing that I'm doing, like your example of your concert you went to, or your event you went to, you were at some level that was like, is this worth my time to stay here or to leave or whatever? And I think that that's a very interesting and completely artificial construct, because there is no time per se, and we're just here, and like the colors, sounds, and sensations you had at that concert were probably not horribly different, although probably louder than we're at home, sitting in front of a crackling fire. And it still is just noise, sounds. Noise, sights, and sensation, right? So we just build up this thing of what's my time worth, to the point where we charge each other for it. I don't know what you charge me for this hour, but I'll pay it because you're on the throne.
I think it's the other way around. You pay the.
I don't know. See, that's where my analogies break down. That's the part of the spiritual journey you got to be very aware of. Your analogies start breaking down horribly. It's not that you can't do them. It's just they start losing their grip.
Yes. Even my money, that one, it's not my money. It's stuff that seems to flow in and flow out. And now I can just trust, okay, something seems to want to put money there, and the right amount of money will come back. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really interesting one to deconstruct, I think. Money as a concept and how it looms in your life or not. I think the whole manifestation and I can get money by manifesting is completely missing the point. It's what is the money as an idea to you in terms of its tangible impact on your ability to live? Because ultimately it's sound, vision, and sensation. And there's food involved and a bit of shelter and things. And then the amount of money you have set aside then is this abstraction that somehow is linked to all that, but it's actually not. It's just your own story. I have many friends, because I'm retirement age, I've retired myself, many friends who are pre-retirement who are absolutely convinced they don't have enough money to retire. And they have plenty of money, mechanically, to be able to do it. But they're just convinced they can't because it's a story. And then other folks who have retired said, oh, I didn't have nearly what I thought I would need, but I'm doing fine. So there's no relation actually mechanically to money to retirement, but it's all just the story of abundance or not that people carry inside them that impacts their perception.
Yes, yes, it is amazing. I read this in a book. We will say, the room feels kind of hot. Let me check. Oh, it's 78. Yes, it's hot. Now,
Right.
The number means nothing. It is a label. It is hot if we feel it to be hot. It is not if it's not. We don't get permission by the label.
That's a great one. That's a really good one. This is a funny transactional thing and this device here, right? So this device, the watch will read heart rate at night when I sleep, and then it will give me a report on how I slept. That's like breaking an experience down to the ultimate transactional level, because it will tell you great, fair, or poor, really rate your sleep, which is really, it's a great example of how pervasive this transactionality has become for all of us. Because when I was, before this technology, none of us were rating our sleep on that way, right? You just say how you felt, right? So I've noticed that there's times I will get up, I feel great, and the watch says that I shouldn't. And then I get in a bad mood because I failed at some score until I realize, but I feel great. Well, there's other times I really feel tired because I just feel like I didn't get a night's sleep. But it says, no, you did wonderfully. Your heart rate variability was perfect. I'm like, then I feel terrible because I don't feel like I should on the score, right? And so the whole thing is this complete microcosm of this weird application of transactionality to what is a more natural living process. But there is utility. So if you notice that your sleep is poor, you could turn the lights off and take certain remedies. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you get to where literally the measuring device itself creates the state, then that's the transactionality I'm talking about, that we've been talking about, and how pervasive it is.
That is a beautiful example. I have people at work who are just like that. You can tell they've got plenty of energy, but they've decided that it's a bad day because they didn't sleep well because their watch said they didn't.
That's right. My watch says I can be grumpy because it says it's 78 degrees and it's hot in here.
Exactly.
The whole time. I was actually comfortable until I saw that thermometer or thermostat. Yeah.
Yes.
So how do you recommend we detransactionalize ourselves? Because that's what this channel is kind of about, right? I mean, what's your thoughts on?
Yeah, living in a state of discovery, there's nothing ever missing. Missing is always a concept. There's a full panel of colors, a full panel of sensations. There's nothing ever missing. So, but our brains concoct that. But if we stop and just check, well, what is here? And then when we've got this idea that something's missing, question that idea. But what's here, it's interesting. For me, it's been a practice of increasing my capacity for joy. In fact, lately I've been using the term expansion. If I'm in an area where I didn't know I could enjoy this, okay, that means I'm in expansion. I'm learning how to increase my capacity for joy in this scenario. We like the periods of intensification. That's when we're in joy, and lo and behold, it's just getting better. But expansion, that's a deliberate process of increasing my capacity for joy.
Okay.
And it comes.
I like the phrase "what is here," because I think that points to the fundamental movement that can help unwind some of this, right? So you articulate it very well. It's like, what is here? So, do I have enough in my retirement account? What is here? Oh, well, I'm okay. I'm doing okay. Oh my goodness, my watch says, what is here? Oh, I feel okay, right? 9 times out of 10. Or I feel a little sleepy. I'll take a nap. Now I feel better, right? What is here? I like that. That's good.
Right.
So not I am that. What is here? Oh, we're on to something. We could sell that.
Right. What are the colors around me? What are the scents around me? What are the flavors around me? What are the sensations around me? It's
Right.
full,
And it just,
always full.
what is here? The other thing I like about that is that it doesn't imply that the entire thing leads to something that is there. And I think that's my mild criticism of a lot of spiritual salesmanship that happens, is that it's all about getting to a there. And whether it's, I'm going to recognize a state of samadhi that is where I'm not right now, but I'm there. I'm going to achieve some level of, level 5 of consciousness, level 6 or whatever. And all that is their promises based on some practice. And so really what is here is really all that matters, because that unwinds the whole thing. So it ultimately unwinds the transactionalism. And I don't think that a lot of the spiritual disciplines inherently have the transactionalism. We all bring it to it. Oh, I could go visit all the baseball parks, or I could go do this meditation at the local ashram, and then I'll get there wherever there is, right? And so if you do the meditation long enough, hopefully you get to here, right? That's the idea. But I think noticing the transactionalism in everything in our culture is its own spiritual practice.
Yes. There's a natural sufficiency to each moment. And I love Byron Katie saying, you can be enlightened to this moment. And something Adyashanti said that I just love. It's not like you reach this place where suddenly now you can go unconsciously awake. Like somehow your automatic is now. No, it turns out we discover what we are and have always been is full and enough, and there's nowhere to get. It really is a gateless gate, and there's no arriving so that now we just, I don't know, flip into some unconsciousness. No, it's a moment by moment. I'm here, and I'm here, and I'm here.
Yeah. Well, the gateless gate is an interesting one, because it implies that if you're thinking about it, it implies that there's some sort of mystical process of the gateless gate, the one hand clapping, but there just is no gate. It's just,
There is
you're
no
just
gate.
sitting on the beach or wherever you are, or at the dump, and the seagulls are flying, and there you are, right? What is here? Boom, right? Yeah, I think it's harder. Every kind of generation of human history has had its own challenges. The Mongols are, not riding down on our city as we sit in our Vienna cafe, right, or whatever. But everyone has their challenges. I do think technology and the incredible micro-transactionalization of everything creates a unique type of challenge at that consciousness level, because it's just so inherent in everything we do, whether it's our social media likes, or now the AI is going to come and create, new vistas of transactionality. And I think it really makes for a big challenge that we have to frame it correctly, so that we all can see through it a bit.
Right. The willingness to just quit measuring, quit having any particular goal being in discovery. And the goals, really, I would say most goals are all about some kind of validation. So the more that I sense the fullness I naturally am, the more the validation just seems completely irrelevant.
The validation is completely irrelevant. That's right. That's right. all of the positive aspects of what we believe the validation can bring is really irrelevant, because the source of the validation is a thought.
Right.
I'm going to have visited all the baseball parks, therefore something I will be looked up to, and I can post it on social media or whatever, right? Whatever the construct of that thought is, once you realize going to all these different locations is like doesn't validate anything, then the whole thing falls apart. You can still go watch baseball and you have a good time. Nothing wrong with that. If you love baseball, go watch it, have a good time, enjoy the peanuts and the hot dogs, and off you go, right? No, there's zero problem with that. But the construct that going to all the baseball parks means anything gets immediately rethought. So you can still go visit all the parks. It's just a different concept. I mean, or it's a conceptless visitation, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, all the way down to, do I have the right shoes for where I'm going? We would say, well, that's a security issue. Am I going to be cold? Am I going to be wet? Am I going to have blisters, whatever? Well, that's a validation. Okay, well, I'm already got this idea that if I have the right shoes, I'm going to have the right experience. That may not be the truth. Some other shoes that I end up having may give the exact right experience.
Yeah.
So
there might be a pair of shoes that are super comfortable that you enjoy wearing, and I'm going to wear these shoes because they're comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But the value you assign to it becomes interesting. So I think very visible things like the shoes I wear or the car I drive, or these kinds of things, you can very easily identify this and say, oh, well, that's me seeking to some sort of validation and things like that. I think that stuff is more visible, and it's good to question it. And if you really are blind to the type of car you drive and you care about what people think, then you've got a little bit of beginning work to do. But it's also now the very subtle. Once you spend some time with self-inquiry and reassessment of our thinking, you get into very subtle levels of identity, and that's where the work gets very interesting, because you're down at a very core level of old ideas, like the basketball story I told, or some of these older ideas. You kind of get in there and you're really playing with them. And that's where I find the journey fascinating. So whether the guy parks his car or not, obviously that's not a big deal, but retiring and levels of identity around retirement are really interesting. What does it mean to not work anymore? These kind of things. So it's interesting to watch how transactional the mind naturally becomes.
Right. And then all of this, suggests that when we leave the transactionality, there's something that turns out to be richer. And that's true. But that even is purely an experience, that even if we are living in the transactionality, that itself is its own experience. And even that is not wrong, is exactly right as it happens. It turns out to be a very interesting thing, a very interesting show to watch.
Yeah. What is here is all there is. So, that's it. Sal Poe, who I have a huge amount of time for and highly recommend his work. I had a chance to go to India and spend some time with him. Great community, great people. He has a great phrase. He says, we're taught in life that just sitting in a room and seeing colors and hearing sounds and feeling sensations is the booby prize, and the real thing is be able to be on a private jet and go to fancy concerts like Lisa and Daniel. That's the prize. But he said, no, it turns out that the booby prize is first prize. That sounds, shapes, sensations, just being here in that is the championship prize, right? All the rest of it is the booby prize. So.
Yeah. I to enjoy a life when it's simple and to enjoy a life when it's complicated has just become this ongoing discovery. And just whatever phase I'm in, There's a natural sufficiency, and it's perfect.
You know, I have to unwind it myself. So.
Yeah, it's so worth it. The whole dropping and letting go is so worth it.
Seems to be, yeah. It's a lot less stressful environment than the other way.
Yes.
my experience, anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has
Thanks
been
for having me
very
on.
rich.
Yeah, and I said the power behind the throne. That was a terrible phrase. You're an amazing spokesperson for inquiry, and it's my help to do a little editing on the back end and a little administration work. So you do great work, and I look forward to seeing your upcoming media stardom. We won't measure it, but we'll just watch it
Right.
here and
Right.
now.
We have the running joke. I don't know how many books I've sold, but I actually do see how many subscribers I have when I have a conversation with you and we
That's right.
actually look.
Then we get transactional out of spirituality. No, I think it's great. I think it's great. The work that you're doing will. It isn't transactional. It's just a statement of the way you see things and the way things are. So it's great stuff. But I appreciate a chance to get in front of the camera for a change. It may be a gateway to harder stuff. I might become an influencer in the spiritual world.
And help people get nowhere.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to end the recording here.